it can be so challenging to honor your own boundaries sometimes. And so putting it out
Mm-hmm.
there so other people can see them, because everyone's going to take what they can take, right? If there's time on the table, they're going to take it. And then you're going to give your family your leftovers. Like, no, thank you. I want them to get the best of me first.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood can change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life and marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood podcast. This episode, I have a guest here, Katy Murray. We're going to be talking about how to slow down while also being a high achiever, which I know a lot of you are like, those are opposites. You cannot do that. And I also happen to know that if you are a high achiever, you probably experience burnout a lot. And as parents, we know that burnout is not conducive to a harmonious family life, right? And so I'm excited to have Katy here because I know for a fact that you want to have it all. You want to have that, awesome job, whether it's you working for someone else and you're climbing up the ladder, or you are your own business owner and you have some big dreams that you want to fulfill. And you don't want to sacrifice family life or your own health. And so I'm excited to dive into this with Katy. Katy, can you introduce yourself? Let us know where you live, how old your kids are, and what you do.
Absolutely, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me on today. So, I'm Katy. I am a mom of a 4-year-old, a wife of 12 years to my husband, and we actually reside on the East Coast. We're originally from the West Coast, but right after we got married, we decided we wanted an adventure. So, we packed up and moved 3,500 miles or something and just went for it. And
Wait, I didn't know that about you. Sorry to cut you off. I did not know that. So, where did you move from and where do you live now?
great question. So we lived in Oregon, in Central Oregon, like Bend,
Okay.
Oregon, after we got married. And then we relocated to basically just outside of Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up and lived in California my
Okay.
entire life. And then this past June, we relocated to Georgia.
So you understand.
I understand. Woo, do I understand. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that. You learn a lot, both in marriage and in family life and all that when you do that
All
big
the
of a move.
things.
But so we've been married for 12 years and I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for over a decade now, but I'm also a human resource professional. So I'm the head of the department at a private organization. And I have a podcast. So I kind of sort of do a lot. Hence the title, like a high achiever. I love to be doing things and being productive. And it's been really fun. But I will say, Michelle, that once my daughter was born, it was different. I mean, it was different when I got married. And like when I got married, he's a functioning adult, so it's great. But like there was learning curves. But when my daughter was born, it was a much bigger transition. And I realized that I needed to hone in on slowing down, which, like you said, is completely opposite of what we usually think about doing when we want to achieve things. But for me, I was like, I got to figure out a better balance because I need to prioritize
Mm-hmm.
my family and I still want to do these other things. So that's me in a quick little nutshell.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know. If you do have like very big dreams and you are out there getting it, hustling, being single is like, okay, yeah, you got all the time in the world. You are literally only responsible for yourself.
Yeah.
And then you get married and they understand, but they want to spend time with you. But you could still get that in, right? Maybe you become a little more efficient. You become better at like really prioritizing the projects that you want to work on. But then when you have kids, they could give less shits about what you want to do.
Yep. They want to be fed, they want to be cared for, and they don't care what's pulling you in another direction at all.
No. They're like, hey, look at me. Look at what I can do. Watch me. So yeah, I totally understand that. So how has your experience been since having your child, and what have you learned firsthand that has helped you get to this place where you can really speak about, like, yeah, that's not going to work? And what are you noticing since you've applied this like realization that, oh, I can't keep doing the things that I've been doing the way I've been doing them, but I still know that I matter and my dreams matter. So what have you done?
Yeah, so I got to a point where like there was a brief time, and I'm gonna be honest and vulnerable, that I was like, oh, my kid won't call me mom because like I'm not going to be just a mother. Like I was like so weird about it because I was so terrified to lose my other identities. And then I remember the first time that my worlds all collided. So one of the businesses we own is photography, and my worlds collided because my client, our official date was like rained out, and so she's like, well, can we switch to tomorrow night? And I was like, no, I don't have childcare. And she's like, well, my mom can come. And it was her and her boyfriend, and she said, my mom can come, she works with children, like she's safe, all this stuff, and my daughter would be with me. And against my better judgment, I was like, sure, let's do it. And I brought my daughter with me, and I wasn't considering her feelings, I wasn't considering technically my feelings in that process. And the photos turned out amazing. The client loved them. My daughter survived and was breathing at the end of it. Everything was fine. But I didn't account for the fact that like she wanted mommy, and this was a stranger, and I was a new mom. She was only a couple months. She was under a year, but now that she's 4, I don't count by months. But so she was probably like 8 months, let's just say. So aware enough to know it was a stranger. So I ended up doing the entire session with her like on my hip. Like I was just carrying her the entire time. And that was a lot. And that's when I realized like, okay, just because I can have my worlds collide, I don't have to. And
Right.
in retrospect, if I would have slowed down, there's 365 days in a year. I could have picked a different day to reschedule when her dad was available to like hang out with her. And that was kind of the moment when I was like, okay, I have to be intentional with my time. Now, granted, my daughter was born December 2019, and I returned from maternity leave. I work in hospitality, so we're on site every day, not remote. And the global pandemic was like announced the day I returned from maternity leave. And so this was like, we were just starting to vamp up that August. Like everything was new. The world was new. And so was the kid and the mom life and all that. And so that's when I was like, okay, let's just slow down. Let's just chill out for a minute and almost refocus. And so that was kind of really that pivotal moment for me, that I can have it all, but I don't have to have it all right now at 4 p.m. in this moment, you know?
Oh my gosh, when I hear you say that, I just think of how toddlers are. It's like, I want what I want when I want it. I don't really care about anybody else, right?
Yeah.
What's mine, or what was it? It's what's mine is mine. What's yours is mine, unless it's broken, then you fix it and then it's mine again.
Exactly.
So, what was that like for you to decide, okay, it's time for me to slow down? Because I know logically we can be like, yeah, I think slowing down is a good idea. But then there's that side of us that like kind of pulls at us. Did you have any like challenges as you were navigating that slowdown?
Any? I had all of them. Whatever they are, put them on me. Well, so I'm a big believer of like the cult of busy. And I just
Sure.
believe like it's such a dilemma because we want to be busy and we want to do this. And I remember when someone had said like, oh, but you always want to be busy. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I want to be productive. I'm not trying to be a busybody. And that's when
Different.
I was like, yeah, two separate things. And don't get me wrong, I have busy weeks, like, and I use the word busy, but I want to be intentional and productive, honestly, when it comes to that. And so that's when I started realizing, okay, what I'm doing isn't working, but I'm also not giving myself enough space to say, hey, what is it that I should be doing? And so that's why it's so important to slow down as a high achiever. I think that a lot of us think that, oh, we're settling for like mediocrity, we're like not doing what we need to do and all these things. But honestly, if you slow down and have a mindful, intentional approach to life, whether that's your business, whether that's your career, whether that's your family time, then you can step back up to the plate and say, okay, now I'm ready to go, but I know where I'm going to go. And
Mm-hmm.
I think when we get into that hustle culture and boss babe, and I want to do all these things, I want to be all these things, we start to spin our wheels and we're working like in it instead of on it. And that can be a
Yes.
huge problem. So that's where kind of like my whole thing stemmed from. And being who I am, when I do like photo shoots, because that's one of the businesses, I'd wear it as a badge of honor that I did like 30 sessions in October and worked full time, 50 hours a
Whoa.
week, and have a child. And I started to realize, like, what does that get me? That doesn't get me anything. Like, let's press pause, let's slow
Yeah.
down, and then reassess.
Yeah, because there comes a point where the money isn't worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the money isn't worth the burnout because you end up breaking yourself probably in more than one way.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with the hangover, right? You gotta like, maybe you get sick. Maybe you've like have absolutely no energy and you are just like laid up in bed forever, but you have a kid and they won't let you, right? And
Yeah.
so you're not being the mom that you want to be, you're not being the wife that you want to be, and so home life just doesn't feel as fun and exciting anymore, and it just kind of feels like bleh, because you
Yeah.
did too much.
Yeah. And it doesn't account for anybody else's feelings, right? Like my husband
Yeah.
is then, working his tail off to like do stuff that I'm not doing. I'm not doing the laundry, I'm not doing the dishes. So now he's doing that, but then he's also picking up the kiddo. And like, it just doesn't account for feelings, let alone, as you know, once you have children, your whole marriage changes.
Yes.
Whether it's for the better or the worse, neither, it just changes. And it's hard to articulate, but then now you're putting pressures on your spouse that, or not giving them the time that they deserve, and finding alone time once you have a child. Sometimes I wonder if we had two, if like they could like coexist, and then I could have my husband back a little bit, but we're not there yet. And so like getting alone time with him can be challenging. And then when I'm burned out, and like you said, you get sick, then you have no
Yeah.
margin. Because then when are you putting the reschedules in? When are you doing the makeup classes?
Right.
Like you're already to the brim, and that can be so detrimental and ruin any forward movement that you potentially could have had.
Yeah. So as a mom of three, I will tell you that just because you make them a friend doesn't mean they're going to be friends. Some of them are awesome. I've seen it and I'm so jealous. And I'm I'm the mom of so I have three. I have a stepson who's almost 15. I also have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And the younger two, uh, they have probably equal amounts of time where they get along and they fight. And so it's like when they're getting along, it's awesome. And when they're not, it's really not awesome. Then you got to step in and mediate, right? So that's not always guaranteed where you're like, okay, like you can just go hang out with the friend that I made you, and I'm going to go hang out with your dad. Like, I wish it was that easy.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we could just program them? Um, okay, so what do you recommend that high achievers do to not let their big dreams, whether it's work, whether it's their own business or projects or hobbies, whatever, not interfere with family life? Because I know, we sometimes have aspirations, personal aspirations, that feel like we have to go slower than we want to because we have other commitments. Like, I'm committed to being a connected mom, I'm committed to being a connected wife. And I also have bouts of like time where I'm like, no, I just want to do this because I'm so excited and I'm so focused. And, maybe it's ADHD. I don't know what it is, but like sometimes it feels like it's conflicting with each other because there's only one you. And it's not like you want to multitask your relationships, right? You just can't really give them the quality of your attention and intention when you're like hanging out with them while doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
So, what can you recommend the listeners do to help kind of manage that? Because like, I know if you're working in corporate, you don't want to say, oh, my family held me back, or, if you chose it, that's different. But like, you don't want to get resentful that's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get this promotion because XYZ, or I'm not going to meet my business goals because of XYZ.
Yeah, I think that, and some of these things that I will suggest are going to be like, your listeners are like, okay, I know that. But number one, here's your reminder, because you're probably not doing it if you're struggling, and that's totally okay. And it looks different for everybody, but some of the practical strategies that I use to slow down are pretty simple. Like, I literally schedule downtime. I'm a type A personality. I have a very full calendar. Like the other day, I asked my husband, I'm like, what are you doing tomorrow? And he's like, oh, I just got a couple meetings. And I like flashed him my calendar, and he's like, oh, okay, so if I don't hear from you, like, I'm tempted to like pull it up. Can I show you really quick what that day looked like?
I'd love to.
If you can see all those appointments. But basically, every hour was accounted for that day. And
Ooh.
one thing with that is I scheduled downtime. So today I left early so we could do this, but I literally put in my calendar holding. It doesn't matter what my boss thinks, which he's very supportive if he tunes in. But it doesn't matter what he thinks. It doesn't matter what my team thinks. It doesn't matter who sees my calendar. I put holding, and that's just for me. And then I ended up actually updating it and saying Katie leaving early, just because I was like, don't expect me to be here. But I put non-negotiables in the calendar, and that includes like my daughter's gymnastics. First, I start out my month, and then down to the week, I look at what the non-negotiables are, and that's family time. So if my husband and I have a date night planned, or we're going to a concert, he loves concerts, we'll put that in the calendar first. Then we'll add in my daughter's things, and then I add in my own downtime to do my own things. And then we start filling in other areas. And that allows me to set boundaries, because then my colleagues who want to share a calendar with me and want to put something in, or the HR assistant, if he puts something in, he knows what he can't. And so, as silly as it sounds, scheduling downtime is huge for me, because then I can be intentional with it. Because in the past, I haven't scheduled it. And when I don't schedule it, then it's not a priority, and I end up booking myself, and if you will, double booking, because that should be downtime. So that's a big one for me. I have like a list we can go through, but I also don't want to just like vomit it all on you guys.
No, I actually want to pause here, because what you're saying is just reiterating what I say all of the time to my clients, to this podcast, to anybody that will listen, is that we really have to be intentional about our priorities. A lot of us will say, oh yeah, what's most important to me are my kids and my marriage, family. But it's like, okay, but if I were to take a look at how you choose to live your life, how you spend your time, I bet that I won't agree with you. Right? They'll say, okay, yeah, my marriage is important to me. Okay, when was the last time you guys had fun together? When was the last time you had alone time together, whether it's inside the house or outside the house? When was the last time that you guys dreamed together, or like really talked about your future together? Not just, oh, are you going to pick her up, or am I going to pick her up? Who's making dinner? Can you do the laundry? Can you pick up groceries? Like, none of that is needle moving when it comes to your life. That's just like, okay, survival. Okay. Yeah. But if we want to live a life that's beyond survival, we have to really get with the big picture, right? Having your vision. So what do you see for your life when you're older? Okay, you want to be this kind of couple, maybe it's like, oh, we're still flirting, we travel together, we have fun together, and we hang out with our grandkids. Okay, what do you need to do today to have that, right? It's not a wait and see kind of thing. It's not like let's wait till the kids are all grown up and then we're gonna, devote our time and energy into our marriage. It's like, your marriage might not exist or feel like it's salvageable at that point, which, by the way, you could still do a lot. Okay. Like, as a marriage coach, I'm telling you, a lot of times it's not too late. Okay. But it is easier to go at it from a proactive standpoint rather than a reactive, like, oh my God, I have to fix everything. Right. And so I love that you're like, yeah, I book everything, I put it on my calendar, and I protect it. I think that's the biggest piece, is you're protecting it. Yeah. So people know, okay, this is a no-no time. Like, you cannot interfere with what I have planned. And you can apply this to your day-to-day time too. It's like just with yourself, having boundaries with yourself. Like, oh, I'm going to have a date. So that means that my day shouldn't be filled to the brim because I will literally have no energy to hang out with you, and I'm going to be such bad company, and it ruins it for everybody. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there because it is so important. And I love that you're really putting that into action by doing it visually and even like letting other people know.
Yeah, I think it can be so challenging to honor your own boundaries sometimes. And so putting it out there so other people can see them, because everyone's going to take what they can take, right? If there's time on the table, they're going to take it. And then you're going to give your family your leftovers. Like, no, thank you. I want them to get the best of me first. For the marriage aspect, implement certain things. Like, there was a couple times when work was fairly frustrating, and I love my job. I love what I do, but that doesn't change the fact that there's frustrating times. And so we don't really talk about work together. I found a confidant at work that I can kind of confide in, who can help me navigate that. And he often won't bring it home either, just because, to your exact point, we're talking about dinner, we're talking about picking up the kid, and then I'm talking about how I had a crappy day. Like, that doesn't give any room for connection.
It's draining.
Yeah. And then that means that my cup from work or from business or from whatever is trickling into now my home life. And I don't want that. Like, I want to come home and just be idiots and have fun and laugh, and who cares what's what, you know? And if we're going to have a bad day, it's because the dog pooped in the house and I'm like annoyed with it, which, by the way, I should knock on wood. They haven't done that for months. So we're good. We have 2 puppies, so they're kind of crazy. But yeah, it's so important to really, really do that. And then to piggyback on that is to practice that mindfulness and that intentionality. Because like you said, if you put it all on there and then you're like, hey babe, can't make it tonight, then what's the point? So you have to honor that follow through. You have to set those boundaries to say, no, I'm going to leave work on time tonight, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. Now, I'm not perfect. Like, I know these things and I practice them 80% of the time. We're still working on it, but man, it makes such a huge difference. And like, one other thing, Michelle, I want to say on kind of that element is I took time off from our business. So we have 2 businesses. We have the photography business, which in 2020 made as much as my day job. And in 2021, it was like, those were our most profitable years. And I realized, like, that's awesome. But to your point, it's money. So I decided to slow down and step back from that. So I still do them, but half as many and way more intentional. And then we have a virtual assisting company that we have a couple team members who work for us, and we do virtual assisting for entrepreneurs and small businesses and private country clubs. And it's a lot of fun, but I realized we had a move coming up. We had all this stuff coming up. So I decided to just slow down and take those off of my schedule for a bit. And when I did that, it was wild. I had free weekends, and I hadn't had free weekends in so long. And honestly, I hated it at first. I truthfully did. I would get up in the morning and like hang out with my kid, which was wonderful. I didn't hate any aspect of what I'm going to describe, but I didn't feel like I was productive. I didn't feel like I was moving. I felt a lack thereof. And I had to get used to being uncomfortable with being outside my comfort zone. And I can't tell you, tomorrow I have nothing on my schedule and I'm so excited. But that's taken me 8 to 12 months to even get to that point where I'm 100% in it. It was almost like I had, and it's not diagnosed, and I know it's a serious thing, but like day depression, where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not being productive. Like, I'm not this, I'm not that. And the analytical type A side of me can't articulate and like analyze the time I spent with my child. Like, you don't check anything off. And so that transition piece was huge for me and really, really hard. And that's why, again, I realized, like, okay, this is all a part of it. Like, this is all a part of who I'm becoming as a mother, as a career-driven woman, as a wife. And you got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And now, like, I literally texted my husband because I gave him a heads up, don't come home right now, we're recording. But I was like, I want to be super productive tonight, and then I'll just coast on Saturday and Sunday and not worry about a thing, because like, I'm going to be intentional and intense even for this stint, and then not. And the last thing I'll say with that is we really gauge our weeks by working days and non-working days. So we both work in person, we're both in hospitality, but then in the evenings, I'll either have working nights or off nights, and we collab together to make sure. So our off nights are always together, and then we just hang out as a family and don't do anything. And then on our on nights, we do bedtime, we do everything together, and then we stay up for another hour or two and just dive into being productive. But the fun thing is that he also has stuff to do. He actually edits my podcast. So we'll just sit together and
Hello,
like
husband.
be productive. So lots of fun there. But yeah, you have to be so intentional and you have to protect that because no one else is going to.
Yeah, 1000%. I mean, I think the biggest thing you can do is setting boundaries for yourself and keeping your own promises that you make to yourself, which we as women struggle to do because women before us didn't do that, right? They gave all of themselves to everyone and left nothing for themselves. And, you know, I've seen so many women end up just like losing their shit because they were resentful and frustrated, but they didn't feel like they had permission to acknowledge it, let alone express it. And so it was like they were trapping themselves and continuing that cycle. And now we're in this phase where it's like we're between two generations, you know, the generation of the selfless martyr, and then the generation's like, oh, I only care about how I feel and self-care and very like about themselves, which is beautiful. But we're like, but I don't know how to do that. Like, how do I do that? I want that. And we kind of have to like reparent ourselves to learn that there's beauty in slowing down, being present, and that the quality of our relationships is really important more than achieving, right? Because I don't know about you, but like my parents are very like, okay, you got to check all these things off, right? Like even with how I was raised, you're going to get good grades, you're going to go to college, you're going to get a job, you're going to invest your 401k, da, 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 right? It's like, okay, check, buy a house, have kids, now what, right? I love that we are now in this era where we're really getting to individualize what we want out of life. And we don't feel as much of a need. We're still working against it, but we don't feel as much of a need to fulfill this like picture that everybody grew up with, but rather we get to have a different picture using different colors, you know, and really making it our own. So earlier, before we hit record, you had mentioned something about selective urgency. Can you share more about that?
Yeah. It's kind of like what I said about my schedule tonight. Like I know that tonight I'm going to be super productive and then I'm not going to do anything the next couple of days. Now, granted, I probably will do some things just because it'll fall into place, but really being intentional with when you are focusing on work and when you're not. And so for me, I know with my podcast, for example, last year in October, I knew I needed to record some podcast episodes. I release one solo a week and one guest a week, or at the time I did. They've changed it up a little bit now. But back then, and I was like, oh man, I'm low on content. Like I need to get these out. So then my selective urgency kicked in and I said, it was in October. And I remember I went in and I said, okay, this 1 week in October, I'm not doing any interviews. Like I'm not doing anything. This is my week. But the week before that and the week after that, I was like, okay, we're going to just grind. Like I'm going to schedule these. I'm going to work with getting the guests on. We're going to get things going and really being intentional with that. Because what happened was I was able to do so much focused, deep work in getting those episodes that I had batched all my content through June. Like, whoa, from October. And I released 2 episodes a week. So just having that sense of like urgency, it kind of kicked me into gear because I was like, I hate on like a Sunday or a Monday being like, my solo episodes just come out Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. and I haven't recorded it. So that made me shift gears to realize like, I don't want to play defensively. I'm going offense all the way. And then if I decide that I don't feel good or my daughter has an extra thing at school that week or she doesn't feel good and we're staying home, my world is not completely rocked.
Yeah, you
and
have a buffer.
You totally, yeah. And so there's that element. And then also, again, having those boundaries where you're not letting someone else govern your schedule. Like, don't get me wrong, like Michelle, even with you and I bouncing back in the DMs trying to figure out a date for this and a time, like I don't know if I don't ask, but I have to figure out what works for me. And I don't want to sound like entitled, but that's where we have that conversation back and forth and we figure out a time that's mutually agreeable because My schedule's kind of wacky because I work in hospitality. But again, if I needed to, and I think we talked about this, I was like, if I need to, I can figure out leaving work early today and we can manage this. Or we can table it until you're ready to take guests next month or the month after, and then I can make sure I plan for that. So really navigating what needs to be handled now versus what doesn't. And then when you're in that moment, well, can I add a couple more, let's just say hypothetically, a couple more minutes or a couple more hours, and then get ahead and create that buffer? Well, yeah, most of the time you probably can. And so for me, that's what I do, because you have to be intentional. And working in HR, like I literally this week alone can tell you that multiple people came up and were like, I have to talk to you today. Like, we have an emergency. And I was like, okay, it's 12:42. I have a 1 o'clock, a 2 o'clock, and a 3:30. And one's with an attorney and they're governing it. So like, I don't know if I'll be available. And so I was honest with the person. They're like, okay, well, I'm here till 6:30. And I'm like, okay. And it was a bit of a challenge because I try to leave at 4. And so I was like, well, I need to honor picking up my daughter on time, and not knowing without a read ahead what their emergency was. Like, I couldn't figure that out.
Right.
It just turns out that they want to join our benefit plan, which is awesome. But it's the 4th and they can't join until the 1st because that's how our enrollment works. So I'm like, that's not an emergency. So
but also, like, can't you email that?
But, I can't control people, just like you understand.
Yeah.
But again, I could have dropped everything and it could have been a real emergency, or it could not have been. But I had to govern that. I had to decide that. And it's the same with our families, with our friends, with our businesses. We have to figure out what that selective urgency is and what is going to pull us in which direction at what time.
Yeah, I love that, because that keeps your internal peace so much better when we are really like choosing. I like the word selective. You're being selective about what you're allowing affect you. Because we do sometimes have that like gut reaction. We're like, oh my gosh, someone needs something from me and they're uncomfortable. But it's like, okay, they can be uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that their emergency needs to be your emergency, right? Like, we're all different people, and that's okay. And you get to decide and take a moment to yourself and be like, okay, what is the actual impact of this? Is this truly an emergency? Like, is someone going to die because I delay this? I mean, chances are very slim that that's going to happen, right? And again, back to knowing your priorities. When you know your priorities, when you know what you're working towards and the kind of life that you want to build, it's very easy to just simply be like, no, that's not an emergency, because it's like, this does not align with what I'm doing. And I know that this is going to negatively impact me if I have to stay at work late. My daughter's going to be upset. Their daycare is probably going to be upset. My husband's going to be wondering where it's just like a negative domino effect. And you kind of have to take time, again, slowing down, reflecting, so that you can make more aligned decisions for yourself. And I think a lot of women struggle with this, right?
Yeah.
What's your experience with this? Did you grow up as a people pleaser like many of us women did?
I'm not exactly sure. I've never called myself a people pleaser, but I do remember, and this is a little bit talking about what you said earlier, like a conversation with my mom, and she was like, it's so nice that your husband does that. And I was like, yeah. Did you ever ask Dad for help with the kids? And she's like, what? And I was like,
that's so foreign to her.
Yeah, I'm like, I ask Philip for help. Like, if I can do it on my own, I do it on my own. But there's days when I'm like, take your child, like figure this kid out, especially when I was like in postpartum. And my mom was like, no, I never thought to ask him. And I'm like, okay, well, Philip's offering right now because we've been married 12 years and he knows that he needs to ask me right now. And so like, that's a whole thing too. But I would say that like my experience with it, and again, it goes back to that slowing down and exactly what you said, you qualified it so well, is you get enhanced clarity and focus. So, like when we slow down, we give ourselves a space to clear our minds and focus on what truly matters. And if you are confused right now as a listener and you're like, but I don't know, well, then try stepping back from that hustle and that bustle of daily life and say, I'm going to pencil in free time to think about where I need to gain my clarity, what I need to do, what are my goals. And those can be your goals as a spouse, those can be your goals as a parent, those can be your goals as an entrepreneur or as a professional or whatever it is. But really slowing down to get that enhanced clarity and focus, because then you're going to have improved like creativity and innovation and be able to say, okay, how can I navigate this differently? I don't want to be going to work 9 to 5 every day. And let's just say you have a long commute. So you're leaving the house at 7 to drop the kids off. You're getting to work by 8:45 or whatever time. And then you're leaving at 5. You're getting the kids by 5:45. Now it's dinner time. Now it's bedtime. And now I just feel like I have to do it all over again. So like slow down so you get that improved creativity and innovation so you can say, this isn't working. How can we pivot it? What can we do? Maybe it means you get up an hour earlier and you have some family time before school and before work, or maybe you end up staying up an hour later. I'm more of a morning person, so for me, I'm always leaning that direction, and then I try to leave work a little bit earlier. But if you're an entrepreneur, you make your own hours, you need to focus on that. And then I don't think, I know and I believe that gives you greater resilience and better well-being, because now you're not filled to the brim and you have some margin, you have some buffer, you have some space to be present and to slow down and to say, okay, the kid has a fever. What's our plan for tomorrow? And navigate it together. Or, okay, the kid's soccer game got canceled. Now what are we going to do as a family? It doesn't always have to be a negative thing, but then you have that resilience. Say, okay, I can adapt, I can change, I can move with this. And then I think, again, I know that you will then improve your relationships and you'll be able to really enhance your decision making and be able to make those decisions to say, yes, we'll do this weekend, or no, we won't. And then your spouse will feel it too. Like I know when I'm stressed and overwhelmed and have that busy hustle culture stuck on me, my husband feels it and he does an amazing job supporting me through it. And he is the kindest spirit, but he's got feelings too. And he needs that one-on-one time. He needs that connection. And as much as I'm like, especially when my daughter was young, we would always talk about this. I was like, well, she's crying and she needs help because she's this way. And it was stressful. But then as I started to realize like, okay, she can cry a little bit longer and I can say, hey, I love you, baby, but let's go take care of the crying infant right now. Not that he ever neglected her by any means or anything, but to say like, hey, I know you have feelings too. Let's get her settled so we can sit down and talk. And that's, in my opinion, the epitome of that slowing down motion to say, hey, Michelle, because I wouldn't like, if we're talking right now, I wouldn't be like, Michelle, my kid's crying. Like, hold on. I would be like, hey, Michelle, can I have 2 minutes really quick? And so honoring that to my spouse, honoring that to me, and taking that deep breath to slow down. And even if that means putting that screaming child, again, depending on its age, in a safe location where it can scream for a moment, it'll grow great lungs, let it happen, and saying, So a lot there, but I really also believe in the lift and shift. I don't know who came up with that. But for me, it's lift and shift. All those things, the enhanced clarity, the enhanced focus, improved creativity, innovation, greater resilience, enhanced decision-making, and improved relationships, that can be in your career. That can be in your home. That can be with your spouse, with your children. That can be in your business. That can be on your podcasts, because all of those are lift and shift, and you can apply it to each element of your life if you simply slow down and figure out what you want to get out of these things. And then boom, 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 it all trickles down.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't have time to think about this stuff, I challenge you, okay? Because yeah, you think you might not have time to really be intentional and map things out and schedule things out and reflect on whether things are working or not, whatever. You're dealing with the negative consequences of not doing that, because you're just like banging your head on the wall and be like, why does my head hurt? You know, it's like, well, if you just take a bit, right? As if your best friend called you in a crisis and all of a sudden you drop everything and you like, give them free therapy. Like, what if you treated your own well-being and your happiness with the same importance, priority, and urgency? Because then when you're able to stop and think about, okay, where am I headed? What am I doing? What's my intention behind this? What do I want out of it? You have direction. Then you're not just like signing up to be on a hamster wheel for the rest of your life. right? Because you want to move somewhere. Like nobody wants to live a life on a treadmill and be like, why am I not going anywhere? It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta get off the treadmill and get on the
Yeah.
floor.
Like mix it up, try something. Like, and it's
Yeah.
that very
It's being
common thing.
experimental.
Yeah, it's the common, and like if you're doing the same thing, you get the same result. That's like the definition of
Exactly.
insanity. And
That's right.
you can't do that. And I think that it's in the gentlest of ways, we all have the same 24 hours. And I've gotten to a point where I run two businesses, I'm the head of a department, I'm at the executive level, and I am a great wife and a great mom. And it's not always easy by any means, but with intentionality, you can make it work. And I think a lot of it also does flip back to that time management skill set and being able to navigate it that way. But if you, like you said, Michelle, if the listener doesn't think they have time, make it. Like set limits on your screen time. I'm sure that you're hanging out on like Threads or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the latest and greatest is. Take 15 minutes every morning before the world wakes up. Wake up 15 minutes earlier. If you know your kids get up at 7, get up at 6:45 or 6:30 or whatever. Make the time, because what you're going to see is then you will get more time. You will figure out what you need and what you want. And yeah, I've struggled with that. Even this week, we've been waking up kind of late and like missing the mark. And the last 2 days, I got up actually for an accountability thing to go walking. I have to walk 6.3 miles because we have a 10K coming up. And so I linked up with a friend and said, meet me at this time. I was 10 minutes late both days, just being honest, but it got my butt out of bed. And I'm like on fire. Like I'm proud of myself. I feel good about making that time. And it has a snowball effect. And that's all because, you decide to do it. So if that means decide to get up early and what do I want to get out of this week? What do I want to get out of this month? Or heck, what do I want to get out of this life? Then you can start to spend a little bit of time in your thoughts and reflect and then navigate from there.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned time management. And in addition to that, I also think it's energy management, right? Because when you are doing something that is aligned with what you want, it's actually life giving. Like it gives you energy. But if you're just like, if your life is just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, and you're not taking the time to really take a look at, am I getting to where I want to go? That's going to be draining, right? And so if you haven't checked it out yet, check out episode 140 with Jill Wright, because we talk all about energy management. And this episode in particular complements the conversation I'm having with Katy really well. So go check that out. Okay. Thank you so much, Katy. I think this is so important for everybody to implement into their lives, because you get to go after your dreams and your goals and have the family life that you want. Okay. You can have your cake and eat it too. It's just, you need to be very intentional about it. So if people want to connect with you, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, Michelle. Well, thank you for having me on the show. You can find me on Instagram or Threads at GingerBiz, GingerBiz. I'm a redhead for those of you who aren't like looking at us. And so that's where that came from. Or my website, which is www.katymurray.com, KATYMURRAY photography.com. And yeah, we'd have I love to link up with anybody. And if you drop into my DMs after listening to this, let me know, because I'm going to cheer you on and encourage you, because we're in this together.
We are. And if you have loved this episode, please reach out to us. Let us know what you loved most about it, because we always love to hear back from our listeners. And if you know someone that would benefit from listening to this, please share it. Okay. I would so appreciate that. And I'm sure they would too. And if you love this show, please go to iTunes and Spotify to leave a rating and review. I would be so grateful. It brings the biggest smile for me to read your review, and it helps grow the show so that more people like you can get the help that they need. All right, I will catch you back here in the next episode. See you later. Bye. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.